This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Robin Cotter, Toronto, Ontario, September 2006. The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston, Leroux. Chapter 9. At the Masked Ball. The envelope was covered with mud and unstamped. It bore the words, "To be handed to Monsieur le Vicomte Raoul de Chagny," with the address in pencil. It must have been flung out in the hope that a passer-by would pick up the note and deliver it, which was what happened. The note had been picked up on the pavement of the Place de l'Opéra. Raoul read it over again with fevered eyes. No more was needed to revive his hope. The sombre picture which he had for a moment imagined of a Christine forgetting her duty to herself made way for his original conception of an unfortunate innocent child, the victim of imprudence and exaggerated sensibility. To what extent, at this time, was she really a victim? Whose prisoner was she? Into what whirlpool had she been dragged? He asked himself these questions with a cruel anguish, but even this pain seemed endurable beside the frenzy into which he was thrown at the thought of a lying and deceitful Christine. What had happened? What influence had she undergone? What monster had carried her off, and by what means? By what means, indeed, but that of music? He knew of Christine's story. After her father's death, she acquired a distaste of everything in life, including her art. She went through the Conservatoire like a poor, soulless singing machine. And suddenly she awoke as though through the intervention of a god. The angel of music appeared upon the scene. She sang Margarita in Faust and triumphed. The angel of music! For 3 months the angel of music had been giving Christine lessons. Ah, he was a punctual singing master, and now he was taking her for drives in the Bois! Raoul's fingers clutched at his flesh above his jealous heart. In his inexperience, he now asked himself with terror what game the girl was playing. Up to what point could an opera singer make a fool of a good-natured young man, quite new to love? Oh, misery! Thus did Raoul's thoughts fly from one extreme to the other. He no longer knew whether to pity Christine or to curse her, and he pitied and cursed her turn and turn about. At all events, he bought a white domino. The hour of the appointment came at last. With his face in a mask trimmed with long, thick lace, looking like a Pierrot in his white wrap, the Viscount thought himself very ridiculous. Men of the world do not go to the opera ball in fancy dress. It was absurd. One thought, however, consoled the Viscount: he would certainly never be recognized. This ball was an exceptional affair, given some time before Shrovetide, in honor of the anniversary of the birth of a famous draughtsman, and it was expected to be much gayer, noisier, more bohemian than the ordinary masked ball. Numbers of artists had arranged to go, accompanied by a whole cohort of models and pupils, who, by midnight, began to create a tremendous din. Raoul climbed the grand staircase at 11:55, did not linger to look at the motley dresses displayed all the way up the marble steps. One of the richest settings in the world allowed no facetious mask to draw him into a war of wits, replied to no jests, and shook off the bold familiarity of a number of couples who had already become a trifle too gay. Crossing the big crush room and escaping from a mad whirl of dancers in which he was caught for a moment, he at last entered the room mentioned in Christine's letter. He found it crammed, for this small space was the point where all those who were going to take supper in the rotunda crossed those who were returning from taking a glass of champagne. The fun here waxed fast and furious. Raoul leaned against a doorpost and waited. He did not wait long. A black domino passed and gave a quick squeeze to the tips of his fingers. He understood that it was she and followed her. "Is that you, Christine?" he asked, between his teeth. The black domino turned round promptly and raised her finger to her lips, no doubt to warn him not to mention her name again. Raoul continued to follow her in silence. He was afraid of losing her, after meeting her again in such strange circumstances. His grudge against her was gone. He no longer doubted that she had nothing to reproach herself with, however peculiar and inexplicable her conduct might seem. He was ready to make any display of clemency, forgiveness, or cowardice. He was in love, and no doubt he would soon receive a very natural explanation of her curious absence. The black domino turned back from time to time to see if the white domino was still following. As Raoul once more passed through the great crush room, this time in the wake of his guide, he could not help noticing a group crowding round a person whose disguise, eccentric air and gruesome appearance were causing a sensation. It was a man dressed all in scarlet, with a huge hat and feathers on the top of a wonderful death's head. From his shoulders hung an immense red velvet cloak, which trailed along the floor like a king's train. And on this cloak was embroidered, in gold letters, which everyone read and repeated aloud, "Don't touch me! I am Red Death, stalking abroad." Then one, greatly daring, did try to touch him, but a skeleton hand shot out of a crimson sleeve and violently seized the rash one's wrist. And he, feeling the clutch of the knuckle-bones, the furious grasp of death, uttered a cry of pain and terror. When Red Death released him at last, he ran away like a very madman, pursued by the jeers of the bystanders. It was at this moment that Raoul passed in front of the funereal masquerader, who had just happened to turn in his direction, and he nearly exclaimed, "The death's head of Perrault Guirec!" He had recognized him. He wanted to dart forward, forgetting Christine, but the black domino, who also seemed a prey to some strange excitement, caught him by the arm and dragged him from the crush room, far from the mad crowd through which Red Death was stalking. The black domino kept on turning back, and apparently on 2 occasions saw something that startled her, for she hurried her pace and Raoul's as though they were being pursued. They went up 2 floors. Here the stairs and corridors were almost deserted. The black domino opened the door of a private box and beckoned to the white domino to follow her. Then Christine, whom he recognized by the sound of her voice, closed the door behind them and warned him, in a whisper, to remain at the back of the box and on no account to show himself. Raoul took off his mask. Christine kept hers on. And when Raoul was about to ask her to remove it, he was surprised to see her put her ear to the partition and listen eagerly for a sound outside. Then she opened the door ajar, looked out into the corridor and, in a low voice, said, "He must have gone up higher." Suddenly she exclaimed, "He is coming down again!" She tried to close the door, but Raoul prevented her, for he had seen, on the top step of the staircase that led to the floor above, a red foot, followed by another, and slowly, majestically, the whole scarlet dress of Red Death met his eyes, and he once more saw the death's head of Perrault Guirec. "It's he!" he exclaimed. "This time he shall not escape me!" But Christine had slammed the door at the moment when Raoul was on the point of rushing out. He tried to push her aside. "Whom do you mean by he?" she asked, in a changed voice. "Who shall not escape you?" Raoul tried to overcome the girl's resistance by force, but she repelled him with a strength which he would not have suspected in her. He understood, or thought he understood, and at once lost his temper. "Who?" he repeated angrily. "Why, he, the man who hides behind that hideous mask of death! The evil genius of the churchyard at Perrault! Red Death! In a word, madame, your friend, your angel of music! But I shall snatch off his mask, as I shall snatch off my own. And this time, We shall look each other in the face, he and I, with no veil and no lies between us, and I shall know whom you love and who loves you." He burst into a mad laugh, while Christine gave a disconsolate moan behind her velvet mask. With a tragic gesture she flung out her two arms, which fixed a barrier of white flesh against the door. "In the name of our love, Raoul, you shall not pass!" He stopped. What had she said? In the name of their love? Never before had she confessed that she loved him. And yet she had had opportunities enough. Pooh, her only objection was to gain a few seconds. She wished to give the Red Death time to escape, and in accents of childish hatred he said: "You lie, madam, for you do not love me, and you have never loved me. What a poor fellow I must be to let you mock and flout me as you have done! Why did you give me every reason for hope at Perros, for honest hope, madame? For I am an honest man, and I believed you to be an honest woman, when your only intention was to deceive me. Alas, you have deceived us all! You have taken a shameful advantage of the candid affection of your benefactress herself, who continues to believe in your sincerity, while you go about the opera ball with Red Death. I despise you!" And he burst into tears. She allowed him to insult her. She thought of but one thing: to keep him from leaving the box. "You will beg my pardon one day for all those ugly words, Raoul, and when you do, I shall forgive you." He shook his head. "No, no, you have driven me mad! When I think that I had only one object in life, to give my name to an opera wench! Raoul! How can you? I shall die of shame!" "No, dear, live!" said Christine's grave and changed voice. "And good-bye. Good-bye, Raoul." The boy stepped forward, staggering as he went. He risked one more sarcasm. "Oh, you must let me come and applaud you from time to time." "I shall never sing again, Raoul." "Really?" he replied, still more satirically. "So he is taking you off the stage. I congratulate you. But we shall meet in the Bois one of these evenings." "Not in the Bois, nor anywhere, Raoul. You shall not see me again." "May one ask at least to what darkness you are returning? For what hell are you leaving, mysterious lady? Or for what paradise?" "I came to tell you, dear, but I can't tell you now. You would not believe me. You have lost faith in me, Raoul. It is finished." She spoke in such a despairing voice that the lad began to feel remorse for his cruelty. "But look here!" he cried. "Can't you tell me what all this means? You are free. There is no one to interfere with you. You go about Paris. You put on a domino to come to the ball. Why do you not go home? What have you been doing this past fortnight? What is this tale about the Angel of Music, which you have been telling Mamma Valerius? Some one may have taken you in, played upon your innocence. I was a witness of it myself at Perros. But you know what to believe now. You seem to me quite sensible, Christine. You know what you are doing. And meanwhile Mamma Valerius lies waiting for you at home and appealing to your good genius. Explain yourself, Christine, I beg of you. Anyone might have been deceived as I was. What is this farce?" Christine simply took off her mask and said: "Dear, it is a tragedy." Raoul now saw her face and could not restrain an exclamation of surprise and terror. The fresh complexion of former days was gone. A mortal pallor covered those features which he had known so charming and so gentle, and sorrow had furrowed them with pitiless lines and traced dark and unspeakably sad shadows under her eyes. My dearest, he moaned, holding out his arms, you promised to forgive me. Perhaps, some day, perhaps," she said, resuming her mask, and she went away, forbidding him with a gesture to follow her. He tried to disobey her, but she turned round and repeated her gesture of farewell with such authority that he dared not move a step. He watched her till she was out of sight. Then he also went down among the crowd, hardly knowing what he was doing, with throbbing temples and an aching heart. And as he crossed the dancing floor, He asked if anybody had seen Red Death. Yes, everyone had seen Red Death, but Raoul could not find him. And, at 2 o'clock in the morning, he turned down the passage, behind the scenes, that led to Christine Daae's dressing-room. His footsteps took him to that room where he had first known suffering. He tapped at the door. There was no answer. He entered, as he had entered when he looked everywhere for the man's voice. The room was empty. A gas jet was burning, turned down low. He saw some writing paper on a little desk. He thought of writing to Christine, but he heard steps in the passage. He had only time to hide in the inner room, which was separated from the dressing-room by a curtain. Christine entered, took off her mask with a weary movement, and flung it on the table. She sighed and let her pretty head fall into her two hands. What was she thinking of? Of Raoul? No, for Raoul heard her murmur, "Poor Erik!" At first he thought he must be mistaken. To begin with, he was persuaded that, if anyone was to be pitied, it was he, Raoul. It would have been quite natural if she had said, "Poor Raoul," after what had happened between them. But, shaking her head, she repeated, "Poor Erik." What had this Erik to do with Christine's sighs, and why was she pitying Erik when Raoul was so unhappy? Christine began to write, deliberately, calmly, and so placidly that Raoul, who was still trembling from the effects of the tragedy that separated them, was painfully impressed. "What coolness!" he said to himself. She wrote on, filling 2, 3, 4 sheets. Suddenly she raised her head and hid the sheets in her bodice. She seemed to be listening. Raoul also listened. Whence came that strange sound, that distant rhythm? A faint singing seemed to issue from the walls. Yes, it was as though the walls themselves were singing. The song became plainer. The words were now distinguishable. He heard a voice, a very beautiful, very soft, very captivating voice. But for all its softness, it remained a male voice. The voice came nearer and nearer. It came through the wall. It approached. And now the voice was in the room, in front of Christine. Christine rose and addressed the voice, as though speaking to someone. "Here I am, Erik," she said. "I am ready. But you are late." Raoul, peeping from behind the curtain, could not believe his eyes, which showed him nothing. Christine's face lit up. A smile of happiness appeared upon her bloodless lips, a smile like that of sick people when they receive the first hope of recovery. The voice without a body went on singing, and certainly Raoul had never in his life heard anything more absolutely and heroically sweet, more gloriously insidious, more delicate, more powerful, in short, more irresistibly triumphant. He listened to it in a fever, and he now began to understand how Christine Daae was able to appear one evening before the stupefied audience with accents of a beauty hitherto unknown, of a superhuman exaltation, while doubtless still under the influence of the mysterious and invisible master. The voice was singing the wedding night song from Romeo and Juliet. Raoul saw Christine stretch out her arms to the voice as she had done, in Perros churchyard, to the invisible violin playing the Resurrection of Lazarus. And nothing could describe the passion with which the voice sang, "Fate links thee to me for ever and a day." The strains went through Raoul's heart. Struggling against the charm that seemed to deprive him of all his will and all his energy and of almost all his lucidity at the moment when he needed them most, he succeeded in drawing back the curtain that hid him, and he walked to where Christine stood. She herself was moving to the back of the room, the whole wall of which was occupied by a great mirror that reflected her image, but not his, for he was just behind her and entirely covered by her. "Fate links thee to me forever and a day." Christine walked toward her image in the glass, and the image came toward her. The two Christines, the real one and the reflection, ended by touching, and Raoul put out his arms to clasp the two in one embrace. But, by a sort of dazzling miracle that sent him staggering, Raoul was suddenly flung back, while an icy blast swept over his face. He saw not 2, but 4, 8, 20 Christines spinning round him, laughing at him and fleeing so swiftly that he could not touch one of them. At last everything stood still again, and he saw himself in the glass. But Christine had disappeared. He rushed up to the glass. He struck at the walls. Nobody! And meanwhile the room still echoed with the distant, passionate singing. Fate links thee to me for ever and a day. Which way had Christine gone? Which way would she return? Would she return? Alas, had she not declared to him that everything was finished? And was the voice not repeating, "Fate links thee to me for ever and a day"? To me? To whom? Then, worn out, beaten, empty-brained, he sat down on the chair which Christine had just left. Like her, he let his head fall into his hands. When he raised it, the tears were streaming down his young cheeks, real, heavy tears, like those which jealous children shed, tears that wept for a sorrow which was in no way fanciful, but which is common to all the lovers on earth, and which he expressed aloud. "Who is this Erik?" he said. End of chapter 9.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Kristen Hughes. Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. Chapter 10. Forget the Name of the Man's Voice. The day after Christine had vanished before his eyes in a sort of dazzlement that still made him doubt the evidence of his senses, Monsieur le Vicomte de Chagny called to inquire at Mamma Valerius. He came upon a charming picture. Christine herself was seated by the bedside of the old lady, who was sitting up against the pillows, knitting. The pink and white had returned to the young girl's cheeks. The dark rings round her eyes had disappeared. Raoul no longer recognized the tragic face of the day before. If the veil of melancholy over those adorable features had not still appeared to the young man as the last trace of the weird drama in whose toils that mysterious child was struggling, he could have believed that Christine was not its heroine at all. She rose without showing any emotion and offered him her hand. But Raoul's stupefaction was so great that he stood there dumbfounded, without a gesture, without a word. "Well, Monsieur de Chagny," exclaimed Mamma Valerius, "don't you know our Christine? Her good genius has sent her back to us." "Mamma," the girl broke in promptly, while a deep blush mantled to her eyes, "I thought, Mamma, that there was to be no more question of that. You know there is no such thing as the angel of music." "But, child, he gave you lessons for 3 months." "Mamma, I have promised to explain everything to you one of these days, and I hope to do so, but you have promised me, until that day, to be silent and to ask me no more questions whatever." "Provided that you promised never to leave me again. But have you promised that, Christine?" "Mamma, all this cannot interest Monsieur de Chagny." "On the contrary, mademoiselle," said the young man in a voice which he tried to make firm and brave, but which still trembled. "Anything that concerns you interests me, to an extent which perhaps you will one day understand. I do not deny that my surprise equals my pleasure at finding you with your adopted mother, and that after what happened between us yesterday, after what you said, and what I was able to guess, I hardly expected to see you here so soon. I should be the first to delight at your return, if you were not so bent on preserving a secrecy that may be fatal to you, and I have been your friend too long not to be alarmed, with Madame Valerius, at a disastrous adventure which will remain dangerous so long as we have not unravelled its threads, and of which you will certainly end by being the victim, Christine." At these words, Mamma Valerius tossed about in her bed. "What does this mean?" she cried. "Is Christine in danger?" "Yes, madame," said Raoul courageously, notwithstanding the signs which Christine made to him. "My God!" exclaimed the good, simple old woman, gasping for breath. "You must tell me everything, Christine. Why did you try to reassure me? And what danger is it, Monsieur de Chagny?" "An impostor is abusing her good faith." "Is the angel of music an impostor?" "She told you herself that there is no angel of music." "But then what is it? In heaven's name! You will be the death of me." "There is a terrible mystery around us, madame, around you, around Christine. A mystery much more to be feared than any number of ghosts or genii." Mamma Valerius turned a terrified face to Christine, who had already run to her adopted mother and was holding her in her arms. "Don't believe him, mummy, don't believe him," she repeated. "Then tell me that you will never leave me again," implored the widow. Christine was silent, and Raoul resumed. "That is what you must promise, Christine. It is the only thing that can reassure your mother and me. We will undertake not to ask you a single question about the past, if you promise us to remain under our protection in future." "That is an undertaking which I have not asked of you, and a promise which I refuse to make you," said the young girl haughtily. "I am mistress of my own activities, Monsieur de Chagny. You have no right to control them, and I will beg you to desist henceforth. As to what I have done during the last fortnight, there is only one man in the world who has the right to demand an account of me, my husband. Well, I have no husband, and I never mean to marry." She threw out her hands to emphasize her words, and Raoul turned pale, not only because of the words which he had heard, but because he had caught sight of a plain gold ring on Christine's finger. "You have no husband, and yet you wear a wedding ring." He tried to seize her hand, but she swiftly drew it back. "That's a present," she said, blushing once more and vainly striving to hide her embarrassment. "Christine, as you have no husband, that ring can only have been given by one who hopes to make you his wife. Why deceive us further? Why torture me still more? That ring is a promise, and that promise has been accepted." "That's what I said!" exclaimed the old lady. "And what did she answer, madam?" "What I chose," said Christine, driven to exasperation. "Don't you think, monsieur, that this cross-examination has lasted long enough? As far as I am concerned—" Raoul was afraid to let her finish her speech. He interrupted her. "I beg your pardon for speaking as I did, mademoiselle. You know the good intentions that make me meddle, just now, in matters which, you no doubt think, have nothing to do with me. But allow me to tell you what I have seen. And I have seen more than you suspect, Christine, or what I thought I saw. For to tell you the truth, I have sometimes been inclined to doubt the evidence of my eyes." "Well, what did you see, sir, or think you saw?" "I saw your ecstasy at the sound of the voice, Christine. The voice that came from the wall, or the next room to yours. Yes, your ecstasy, and that is what makes me alarmed on your behalf. You are under a very dangerous spell, and yet it seems that you are aware of the impostor, because you say today that there is no angel of music. In that case, Christine, why did you follow him that time? Why did you stand up, with radiant features, as though you were really hearing angels? Ah, it is a very dangerous voice, Christine, for I myself, when I heard it, was so much fascinated by it that you vanished before my eyes without my seeing which way you passed. Christine, Christine, in the name of heaven, in the name of your father, who is in heaven now, and who loved you so dearly, and who loved me too, Christine, tell us, tell your benefactress and me, to whom does that voice belong? If you do, We will save you in spite of yourself. Come, Christine, the name of the man who had the audacity to put a ring on your finger." "Monsieur de Chagny," the girl declared coldly, "you shall never know." Thereupon, seeing the hostility with which her ward had addressed the Vicomte, Mamma Valerius suddenly took Christine's part. "And if she does love that man, Monsieur le Vicomte, even then it is no business of yours." "Alas, madame," Raoul humbly replied, unable to restrain his tears, "alas, I believe that Christine really does love him. But it is not only that which drives me to despair, for what I am not certain of, madame, is that the man whom Christine loves is worthy of her love." "It is for me to be the judge of that, monsieur," said Christine, looking Raoul angrily in the face. "When a man," continued Raoul, "adopts such romantic methods to entice a young girl's affections—" "The man must be either a villain or the girl a fool, is that it?" "Christine!"
"Raoul, why do you condemn a man whom you have never seen, whom no one knows, and about whom you yourself know nothing?"
"Yes, Christine, yes, I at least know the name that you thought to keep from me forever. The name of your angel of music, mademoiselle, is Eric." Christine at once betrayed herself. She turned white as a sheet and stammered: "Who told you?" "You yourself."
"How do you mean?"
"By pitying him the other night, the night of the masked ball. When you went to your dressing-room, did you not say, 'Poor Eric'? Well, Christine, there was a poor Raoul who overheard you."
"This is the second time that you have listened behind the door, Monsieur de Chagny."
"I was not behind the door. I was in the dressing-room, in the inner room, mademoiselle."
"Oh, unhappy man!" moaned the girl, showing every sign of unspeakable terror. "Unhappy man! Do you want to be killed?"
"Perhaps."
Raoul uttered this perhaps with so much love and despair in his voice that Christine could not keep back a sob. She took his hands and looked at him with all the pure affection of which she was capable. "Raoul," she said, "forget the man's voice and do not even remember its name. You must never try to fathom the mystery of the man's voice."
"Is the mystery so very terrible?"
"There is no more awful mystery on this earth. Swear to me that you will make no attempt to find out," she insisted. "Swear to me that you will never come to my dressing-room unless I send for you."
"Then you promise to send for me sometimes, Christine?"
"I promise."
"When?"
"Tomorrow."
"Then I swear to do as you ask." He kissed her hand and went away, cursing Eric and resolving to be patient. End of chapter 10.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. Chapter 11. Above the Trapdoors. The next day he saw her at the opera. She was still wearing the plain gold ring. She was gentle and kind to him. She talked to him of the plans which he was forming of his future, of his career. He told her that the date of the Polar expedition had been put forward, and that he would leave France in 3 weeks, or a month at least. She suggested almost gaily that he must look upon the voyage with delight, as a stage towards his coming fame, and when he replied that fame without love was no attraction in his eyes, she treated him as a child whose sorrows were only short-lived. "How can you speak so lightly of such serious things?" he asked. "Perhaps we shall never see each other again. I may die during that expedition." "Or I," she said simply. She no longer smiled or jested. She seemed to be thinking of some new thing that had entered her mind for the first time. Her eyes were all aglow with it. "What are you thinking of, Christine?" "I am thinking that we shall not see each other again." "And does that make you so radiant?" "And that, in a month, we shall have to say good bye forever." Unless, Christine, we pledge our faith and wait for each other forever." She put her hand on his mouth. "Hush, Raoul. You know there is no question of that, and we shall never be married. That is understood." She seemed suddenly almost unable to contain an overpowering gaiety. She clapped her hands with childish glee. Raoul stared at her in amazement. But, she continued, holding out her two hands to Raoul, or rather giving them to him, as though she had suddenly resolved to make him a present of them, "but if we cannot be married, we can be engaged. Nobody will know but ourselves, Raoul. There have been plenty of secret marriages. Why not a secret engagement? We are engaged, dear, for a month. In a month you will go away, and I can be happy at the thought of that month all my life long." She was enchanted with her inspiration. Then she became serious again. "This," she said, "is a happiness that will harm no one." Raoul jumped at the idea. He bowed to Christine and said, "Mademoiselle, I have the honor to ask for your hand." "Why, you have both of them already, my dear betrothed. Oh, Raoul, how happy we shall be! We must play at being engaged all day long." It was the prettiest game in the world, and they enjoyed it like the children that they were. Oh, the wonderful speeches they made to each other, and the eternal vows they exchanged! They played at hearts as other children might play at ball, only as it was really their two hearts that they flung to and fro, they had to be very, very handy to catch them, each time, without hurting them. One day, about a week after the game began, Raoul's heart was badly hurt, and he stopped playing and uttered these wild words: "I shan't go to the North Pole." Christine, who in her innocence had not dreamed of such a possibility, suddenly discovered the danger of the game and reproached herself bitterly. She did not say a word in reply to Raoul's remark, and went straight home. This happened in the afternoon, in the singer's dressing-room, where they met every day, and where they amused themselves by dining on 3 biscuits, 2 glasses of port, and a bunch of violets. In the evening she did not sing, and he did not receive his usual letter, though they had arranged to write to each other daily during that month. The next morning he ran off to Mamma Valerius, who told him that Christine had gone away for 2 days. She had left at 5 o'clock the day before. Raoul was distracted. He hated Mamma Valerius for giving him such news as that with such stupefying calmness. He tried to sound her, but the old lady obviously knew nothing. Christine returned on the following day. She returned in triumph. She renewed her extraordinary success of the gala performance. Since the adventure of the toad, Carlotta had not been able to appear on the stage. The terror of a fresh coq filled her heart and deprived her of all her power of singing, and the theater that had witnessed her incomprehensible disgrace had become odious to her. She contrived to cancel her contract. Daae was offered the vacant place for the time. She received thunders of applause in the Juive. The Vicomte, who of course was present, was the only one to suffer on hearing the thousand echoes this fresh triumph, for Christine still wore her plain gold ring. A distant voice whispered in the young man's ear: "She is wearing the ring again tonight, and you did not give it to her. She gave her soul again tonight, and did not give it to you. If she will not tell you what she has been doing these last 2 days, you must go and ask Erik." He ran behind the scenes and placed himself in her way. She saw him, for her eyes were looking for him. She said, "Quick, quick, come!" and she dragged him to her dressing-room. Raoul at once threw himself on his knees before her. He swore that he would go, and he entreated her never again to withhold a single hour of the ideal happiness which she had promised him. She let her tears flow. They kissed like a despairing brother and sister who have been smitten with a common loss, and who meet to mourn a dead parent. Suddenly she snatched herself from the young man's soft and timid embrace, seemed to listen to something, and with a quick gesture pointed to the door. When he was on the threshold, she said in a low voice that the Vicomte guessed rather than heard her words: "To-morrow, my dear betrothed, and be happy, Raoul, I sang for you tonight." He returned the next day, but those 2 days of absence had broken the charm of their delightful make-believe. They looked at each other in the dressing-room with their sad eyes without exchanging a word. Raoul had to restrain himself not to cry out, "I am jealous! I am jealous! I am jealous!" But she heard him all the same. Then she said, "Come for a walk, dear. The air will do you good." Raoul thought that she would propose a stroll in the country, far from that building which he detested as a prison whose jailer he could feel walking within the walls, the jailer Eric. But she took him to the stage and made him sit on the wooden curb of a well in the doubtful peace and coolness of a first scene set for the evening's performance. On another day she wandered with him, hand in hand, along the deserted paths of a garden whose creepers had been cut out by a decorator's skilful hands. It was as though the real sky, the real flowers, the real earth were forbidden her for all time, and she condemned to breathe no other air than that of the theatre. An occasional fireman passed, watching over their melancholy idyll from afar, and she would drag Raoul up above the clouds in the magnificent disorder of the grid, where she loved to make him giddy by running in front of him along the frail bridges, among the thousands of ropes fastened to the pulleys, the windlasses, the rollers, in the midst of a regular forest of yards and masts. If he hesitated, she said with an adorable pout of her lips, "You a sailor!" And then they returned to terra firma, that is to say, to some passage that led them to the little girls' dancing school, where brats between 6 and 10 were practicing their steps, in the hope of becoming great dancers one day, covered with diamonds. Meanwhile, Christine gave them sweets instead. She took him to the wardrobe and property rooms, took him all over her empire, which was artificial, but immense, covering 17 stories from the ground floor to the roof, and inhabited by an army of subjects. She moved among them like a popular queen, encouraging them in their labors, sitting down in the workshops, giving words of advice to the workmen whose hands hesitated to cut into the rich stuffs that were to clothe her heroes. They were inhabitants of that country who practiced every trade. There were cobblers, there were goldsmiths. All had learnt to love her, for she interested herself in all their troubles and all their little hobbies. She knew unsuspected corners that were secretly occupied by little old couples. She knocked at their door, and introduced Raoul to them as a Prince Charming who had asked for her hand, and the two of them, sitting on some worm-eaten property, would listen to the legends of the opera, even as in their childhood they had listened to the Breton folk-tales. Those old people remembered nothing outside the opera. They had lived there for years without number. Past managements had forgotten them. Palace revolutions had taken no notice of them. The history of France had run its course unknown to them, and nobody recollected their existence. The precious days sped in this way, and Raoul and Christine, by affecting excessive interest in outside matters, strove awkwardly to hide from each other the one thought of their hearts. One fact was certain, that Christine, who until then had shown herself the stronger of the two, suddenly became inexpressibly nervous. When on their expedition she would start running without reason, or else suddenly stop, and her hand, turning ice-cold in a moment, would hold the young man back. Sometimes her eyes seemed to pursue imaginary shadows. She cried, "This way, and this way, and this way," laughing in a breathless laugh that often ended in tears. Then Raoul tried to speak, to question her, in spite of his promises. But even before he had worded his question, she answered feverishly, "Nothing, I swear, it's nothing." Once when they were passing before an open trap-door on the stage, Raoul stopped over the dark cavity and said, "You have shown me over the upper part of your empire, Christine, but there are strange stories told of the lower part. Shall we go down?" She caught him in her arms, as though she feared to see him disappear down the black hole, and in a trembling voice whispered, "Never! I will not have you go there. Besides, it's not mine. Everything that is underground belongs to him." Raoul looked her in the eyes and said roughly, "So he lives down there, does he?" "I never said so. Who told you a thing like that? Come away. I sometimes wonder if you are quite sane, Raoul. You always take things in such an impossible way. Come along, come." And she literally dragged him away, for he was obstinate and wanted to remain by the trap-door. That hole attracted him. Suddenly the trap-door closed, and so quickly that they did not even see the hand that worked it, and they remained quite dazed. "Perhaps he was there," Raoul said at last. She shrugged her shoulders, but did not seem very easy. "No, no, it was the trap-door shutters. They must do something, you know. They open and shut the trap-doors without any particular reason. It's like the door shutters. They must spend their time somehow." "But suppose it were he, Christine?" "No, no. He has shut himself up. He's working." "Oh, really? He's working, is he?" Yes, he can't open and shut trap-doors and work at the same time." She shivered. "What is he working at?" "Oh, something terrible. But it's all the better for us. When he is working at that he sees nothing. He does not eat, drink, or breathe for days and nights at a time. He becomes a living dead man, and has no time to amuse himself with the trap-doors." She shivered again. She was still holding him in her arms. Then she sighed and said in her turn, "Suppose it were he!" "Are you afraid of him?" "No, no, of course not," she said. For all that, on the next day and the following days, Christine was careful to avoid the trap-doors. Her agitation increased as the hours passed. At last, one afternoon, she arrived very late, with her face so desperately pale, and her eyes so desperately red, that Raoul resolved to go to all lengths, including that which he foreshadowed when he blurted out that he would not go on the North Pole expedition unless she first told him the secret of the man's voice. "Hush! Hush, in heaven's name! Suppose he heard you! You unfortunate Raoul!" And Christine's eyes stared wildly at everything around her. "I will remove you from his power, Christine, I swear it, and you shall not think of him any more." "Is it possible?" She allowed herself this doubt, which was an encouragement while dragging the young man up to the topmost floor of the theatre, far, far from the trap-doors. "I shall hide you in some unknown corner of the world where he cannot come to look for you. You will be safe, and then I shall go away, as you have sworn never to marry." Christine seized Raoul's hands and squeezed them with incredible rapture. But suddenly alarmed, she turned away her head. "Higher," was all she said, "higher still!" And she dragged him up towards the summit of the building. He had a difficulty in following her. They were soon under the very roof, in the maze of timber-work. They slipped through the buttresses, the rafters, the joists. They ran from beam to beam, as they might have run from tree to tree in a forest. And despite the care which she took to look behind her at every moment, she failed to see a shadow which followed her like her own shadow, which stopped when she stopped, which started again when she did, and which made no more noise than a well-conducted shadow should. As for Raoul, he saw nothing either, for when he had Christine in front of him, nothing interested him that happened behind. End of chapter 11.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Kristen Luoma, greenkri.com. The Phantom of the Opera, Chapter 12, Apollo's Lyre. On this way they reached the roof. Christine tripped over it as lightly as a swallow. Their eyes swept the empty space between the three domes and the triangular pediment. She breathed freely over Paris, the whole valley of which was seen at work below. She called Raoul to come quite close to her, and they walked side by side along the zinc streets in the leaden avenues. They looked at their twin shapes in the huge tanks full of stagnant water, where, in the hot weather, the little boys of the ballet, a score or so, learned to swim and dive. The shadow had followed behind them, clinging to their steps, and the two children little suspected its presence when they at last sat down, trustingly, under the mighty protection of Apollo, who, with a great bronze gesture, lifted his huge lyre to the heart of a crimson sky. It was a gorgeous spring evening. Clouds, which had just received their gossamer robe of gold and purple from the setting sun, drifted slowly by, and Christine said to Raoul, "Soon we shall go further and faster than the clouds, to the end of the world, and then you will leave me, Raoul. But if, when the moment comes for you to take me away, I refuse to go with you, well, you must carry me off by force." "Are you afraid that you will change your mind, Christine?" "I don't know," she said, shaking her head in an odd fashion. "He is a demon," and she shivered and nestled in his arms with a moan. "I'm afraid now of going back to live with him, in the ground." "What compels you to go back, Christine?" "If I do not go back to him, terrible misfortunes may happen. But I can't do it. I can't do it. I know one ought to be sorry for people who live underground, but he is too horrible. And yet the time is at hand. I have only a day left, and if I do not go, he will come and fetch me with his voice, and he will drag me with him underground, and go on his knees before me with his death's hand, and he will tell me that he loves me, and he will cry. Oh, those tears, Raoul, those tears in the two black eye sockets of the death's head! I cannot see those tears flow again." She wrung her hands in anguish, while Raoul pressed her to his heart. "No, no, you shall never again hear him tell you that he loves you. You shall not see his tears. Let us fly, Christine, let us fly at once." And he tried to drag her away, then and there, but she stopped him. "No, no," she said, shaking her head sadly. "Not now. It would be too cruel. Let him hear me sing tomorrow evening, and then we will go away. You must come and fetch me in my dressing-room at midnight exactly. He will then be waiting for me in the dining-room by the lake. We shall be free, and you shall take me away. You must promise me that, Raoul, even if I refuse, for I feel that, if I go back this time, I shall perhaps never return." And she gave a sigh to which it seemed to her that another sigh, behind her, replied. "Didn't you hear?" Her teeth chattered. "No," said Raoul, "I heard nothing." "It is too terrible," she confessed, "to be always trembling like this. And yet we run no danger here. We are at home, in the sky, in the open air, in the light. The sun is flaming, and night birds cannot bear to look at the sun. I have never seen him by daylight. It must be awful. Oh, the first time I saw him, I thought he was going to die." "Why?" asked Raoul, really frightened at the aspect which this strange confidence was taking. "Because I had seen him." This time Raoul and Christine turned round at the same time. "There is someone in pain," said Raoul. "Perhaps someone has been hurt. Did you hear?" "I can't say," Christine confessed. "Even when he is not there, my ears are full of his sighs. Still, if you heard..." They stood up and looked around them. They were quite alone on the immense lead roof. They sat down again, and Raoul said, "Tell me how you saw him first." "I had heard him for 3 months without seeing him. The first time I heard it, I thought, as you did, that that adorable voice was singing in another room. I went out and looked everywhere. But as you know, Raoul, my dressing-room is very much by itself, and I could not find the voice outside my room, whereas it went on steadily inside. And it not only sang, but it spoke to me and answered my questions, like a real man's voice, with this difference, that it was as beautiful as the voice of an angel. I had never got the angel of music whom my poor father had promised to send me as soon as he was dead. I really think that Mamma Valerius was a little bit to blame. I told her about it, and she at once said, 'It must be the angel. At any rate, you can do no harm by asking him.' I did so, and the man's voice replied that, yes, it was the angel's voice, the voice which I was expecting and which my father had promised me. From that time onward, the voice and I became great friends. It asked to give me lessons every day. I agreed, and never failed to keep the appointment which it gave me in my dressing-room. You have no idea, though you have heard the voice, of what those lessons were like." "No, I have no idea," said Raoul. "What was your accompaniment?" "We were accompanied by a music which I do not know. It was behind the wall and wonderfully accurate. The voice seemed to understand mine exactly, to know precisely where my father had left off teaching me. In a few weeks' time, I hardly knew myself when I sang. I was even frightened. It seemed to dread a sort of witchcraft behind it, but Mamma Valerius reassured me. She said that she knew I was much too simple a girl to give the devil a hold on me. My progress, by the voice's own order, was kept a secret between the voice, Mamma Valerius, and myself. It was a curious thing, but outside the dressing-room I sang with my ordinary, everyday voice, and nobody noticed anything. I did all that the voice asked. It said, 'Wait and see. We shall astonish Paris.' And I waited and lived on in a sort of ecstatic dream. It was then that I saw you for the first time one evening, in the house. I was so glad that I never thought of concealing my delight when I reached my dressing-room. Unfortunately, the voice was there before me and soon noticed, by my air, that something had happened. It asked what was the matter, and I saw no reason for keeping our story secret, or concealing the place which you filled in my heart. Then the voice was silent. I called to it, but it did not reply. I begged and entreated, but in vain. I was terrified lest it had gone for good. I wish to heaven it had, dear. That night I went home in a desperate condition. I told Mamma Valerius, who said, "Why, of course, the voice is jealous." And that, dear, first revealed to me that I loved you. Christine stopped and laid her head on Raoul's shoulder. They sat like that for a moment in silence, and they did not perceive the moment, at a few steps from them, of the creeping shadow of two great black wings, a shadow that came along the roof so near them that it could have stifled them by closing over them. "The next day," Christine continued with a sigh, "I went back to my dressing-room in a very pensive frame of mind. The voice was there, spoke to me with great sadness, and told me plainly that, if I must bestow my heart on earth, there was nothing for the voice to do but to go back to heaven. And it said this with such an accent of human sorrow that I ought then and there to have suspected and begun to believe that I was the victim of my deluded senses. But my faith in the voice, with which the memory of my father was so closely intermingled, remained undisturbed. I feared nothing so much as that I might never hear it again. I had thought about my love for you and realized all the useless danger of it, and I did not even know if you remembered me. Whatever happened, your position in society forbade me to contemplate the possibility of ever marrying you, and I swore to the voice that you were no more than a brother to me, nor ever would be, and that my heart was incapable of any earthly love. And that, dear, was why I refused to recognize or see you when I met you on the stage or in the passages. Meanwhile, the hours during which the voice taught me were spent in divine frenzy, until at last the voice said to me, 'You can now, Christine Daae, give to men a little of the music of heaven.' I don't know how it was that Carlotta did not come to the theater that night, nor why I was called upon to sing in her stead, but I sang with a rapture I had never known before, and I felt for a moment as if my soul were leaving my body." "Oh, Christine," said Raoul, "my heart quivered that night at every accent of your voice. I saw the tears stream down your cheeks, and I wept with you. How could you sing like that while crying?" "I felt myself fainting," said Christine. "I closed my eyes. When I opened them, you were by my side. But the voice was there also, Raoul. I was afraid for your sake, and again I would not recognize you, and began to laugh when you reminded me that you had picked up my scarf in the sea. Alas, there is no deceiving the voice. The voice recognized you, and the voice was jealous. It said that, if I did not love you, I would not avoid you, but treat you like any other old friend. It made me scene upon scene. At last I said to the voice, 'That will do. I'm going to Paris tomorrow to pray on my father's grave, and I shall ask Monsieur Raoul de Chagny to go with me.' 'Do as you please,' replied the voice. 'But I shall be at Paris too, for I am wherever you are, Christine. And if you are still worthy of me, if you have not lied to me, I will play you the resurrection of Lazarus on the stroke of midnight, on your father's tomb and on your father's violin.' That, dear, was how I came to write you the letter that brought you to Paros. How could I have been so beguiled? How was it, when I saw the personal, the selfish point of view of the voice, that I did not suspect some impostor? Alas, I was no longer mistress of myself. I had become this thing." "But, after all," cried Raoul, "you soon came to know the truth. Why did you not at once rid yourself of that abominable nightmare?" "Know the truth, Raoul? Rid myself of that nightmare? But, my poor boy, I was not caught in the nightmare until the day when I learned the truth. Pity me, Raoul, pity me. You remember the terrible evening when Carlotta thought that she had been turned into a toad on the stage, and when the house was suddenly plunged in darkness through the chandelier crashing to the floor. There were killed and wounded that night, and the whole theater rang with terrified screams. My first thought was for you and the voice. I was at once easy where you were concerned, for I had seen you in your brother's box, and I knew that you were not in danger. But the voice had told me that it would be at the performance, and I was really afraid for it, just as if it had been an ordinary person who was capable of dying. I thought to myself, the chandelier may have come down upon the voice. I was then on the stage and was nearly running into the house to look for the voice among the killed and wounded, when I thought that, if the voice was safe, it would be sure to be in my dressing-room, and I rushed to my room. The voice was not there. I locked my door, and with tears in my eyes besought it, if it were still alive, to manifest itself to me. The voice did not reply, but suddenly I heard a long, beautiful wail which I knew well. It is the plaint of Lazarus when, at the sound of the Redeemer's voice, he begins to open his eyes and see the light of day. It was the music which you and I, Raoul, heard at Perros. And then the voice began to sing the leading phrase: "Come and believe in me. Whoso believes in me shall live. Walk. Whoso hath believed in me shall never die." I cannot tell you the effect which that music had upon me. It seemed to command me personally to come, to stand up and come to it. It retreated, and I followed. "Come and believe in me." I believed in it. I came, and this was the extraordinary thing. My dressing-room, as I moved, seemed to lengthen out. Evidently it must have been an effect of mirrors, for I had the mirror in front of me, and suddenly I was outside the room without knowing how. What? Without knowing how? Christine, you must really stop dreaming. I was not dreaming, dear. I was outside my room without knowing how. You, who saw me disappear from my room one evening, may be able to explain it, but I cannot. I can only tell you that, suddenly, there was no mirror before me, and no dressing-room. I was in a dark passage. I was frightened, and I cried out. It was quite dark, but for a faint red glimmer at a distant corner of the wall. I cried out. My voice was the only sound, for the singing and the violin had stopped. And suddenly a hand was laid on mine, or rather a stone-cold, bony thing that seized my wrist and did not let go. I cried out again. An arm took me around the waist and supported me. I struggled for a little while, and then gave up the attempt. I was dragged toward the little red light, and then I saw that I was in the hands of a man wrapped in a large cloak and wearing a mask that hid his whole face. I made one last effort. My limbs stiffened. My mouth opened to scream, but a hand closed it, a hand which I felt on my lips, on my skin, a hand that smelt of death. Then I fainted away. When I opened my eyes, we were still surrounded by darkness. A lantern standing on the ground showed a bubbling well. The water splashing from the well disappeared almost at once under the floor on which I was lying, with my head on the knee of the man in the black cloak and the black mask. He was bathing my temples, and his hands smelt of death. I tried to push them away and asked, "Who are you? Where is the voice?" His only answer was a sigh. Suddenly, a hot breath passed over my face, and I perceived a white shape beside the man's black shape in the darkness. The black shape lifted me on to the white shape. A glad neighing greeted my astounded ears, and I murmured, "César!" The animal quivered. Raoul, I was lying half back on a saddle, and I had recognized the white horse out of the Profeta, which I had so often fed with sugar and sweets. I remembered that one evening there was a rumor in the theater that the horse had disappeared and that it had been stolen by the opera ghost. I believed in the voice, but had never believed in the ghost. Now, however, I began to wonder, with a shiver, whether I was the ghost's prisoner. I called upon the voice to help me, for I should never have imagined that the voice and the ghost were one. You have heard about the opera ghost, have you not, Raoul? Yes, but tell me what happened when you were on the white horse of the Profeta. I made no movement and let myself go. The black shape held me up, and I made no effort to escape. A curious feeling of peacefulness came over me, and I thought that I must be under the influence of some cordial. I had the full command of my senses, and my eyes became used to the darkness, which was lit, here and there, by fitful gleams. I calculated that we were in a narrow circular gallery, probably running all around the Opera, which is immense underground. I had once been down into those cellars, but had stopped at the 3rd floor, though there were 2 lower still, large enough to hold a town. But the figures of which I caught sight had made me run away. There are demons down there, quite black, standing in front of boilers, and they wield shovels and pitchforks, and poke up fires and stir up flames, and, if you come too near to them, they frighten you by suddenly opening the red mouths of their furnaces. Well, while César was quietly carrying me on his back, I saw those black demons in the distance, looking quite small, in front of the red fires of their furnaces. They came into sight, disappeared, and came into sight again as we went on our winding way. At last they disappeared altogether. The shape was still holding me up, and César walked on, unled and sure-footed. I could not tell you, even approximately, how long this ride lasted. I only know that we seemed to turn, and often went down a spiral stair into the very heart of the earth. Even then, it may be that my head was turning, but I don't think so. No, my mind was quite clear. At last, César raised his nostrils, sniffed the air, and quickened his pace a little. I felt a moistness in the air, and César stopped. A darkness had lifted. A sort of bluey light surrounded us. We were on the edge of a lake, whose leaden waters stretched into the distance, into the darkness. But the blue light lit up the bank, and I saw a little boat fastened to an iron ring on the wharf. A boat? Yes, but I knew that all that existed, and that there was nothing supernatural about that underground lake and boat. But think of the exceptional conditions in which I arrived upon that shore. I don't know whether the effects of the cordial had worn off when the man's shape lifted me into the boat, but my terror began all over again. My gruesome escort must have noticed it, for he sent César back, and I heard his hoofs trampling up a staircase, while the man jumped into the boat, untied the rope that held it, and seized the oars. He rowed with a quick, powerful stroke, and his eyes, under the mask, never left me. We slipped across the noiseless water in the bluey light which I told you of. Then we were in the dark again, and we touched shore. And I was once more taken up in the man's arms. I cried aloud, and then suddenly I was silent, dazed by the light. Yes, a dazzling light, in the midst of which I had been put down. I sprang to my feet. I was in the middle of a drawing-room that seemed to me to be decorated, adorned and furnished with nothing but flowers. Flowers both magnificent and stupid, because of the silk ribbons that tied them to baskets, like those which they sell in the shops on the boulevards. They were much too civilized flowers, like those which I used to find in my dressing-room after a first night. And in the midst of all these flowers stood the black shape of the man in the mask, with arms crossed, and he said, "Don't be afraid, Christine, you are in no danger." It was the voice! My anger equaled my amazement. I rushed at the mask and tried to snatch it away, so as to see the face of the voice. The man said, "You are in no danger so long as you do not touch the mask." And taking me gently by the wrists, he forced me into a chair, and then went down on his knees before me, and said nothing more. His humility gave me back some of my courage, and the light restored me to the realities of life. However extraordinary the adventure might be, I was now surrounded by mortal, visible, tangible things. The furniture, the hangings, the candles, the vases, and the very flowers in their baskets, of which I could almost have told whence they came and what they cost, were bound to confine my imagination to the limits of a drawing-room quite as commonplace as any, that at least had the excuse of not being in the cellars of the Opera. I had, no doubt, to do with a terrible, eccentric person who, in some mysterious fashion, had succeeded in taking up his abode there, under the opera-house, 5 stories below the level of the ground. And the voice which I had recognized under the mask, was on its knees before me, was a man, and I began to cry. The man, still kneeling, must have understood the cause of my tears, for he said, "It is true, Christine, I am not an angel, nor a genius, nor a ghost. I am Erik." Christine's narrative was again interrupted. An echo behind them seemed to repeat the word after her. "Erik!" What echo? They both turned round and saw that night had fallen. Raoul made a movement as though to rise, but Christine kept him beside her. "Don't go," she said. "I want you to know everything here." "But why here, Christine? I am afraid of your catching cold." "We have nothing to fear except the trapdoors, dear. And here we are miles away from the trapdoors. And I am not allowed to see you outside the theater. This is not the time to annoy him. We must not arouse his suspicion." "Christine, Christine, something tells me you are wrong to wait till tomorrow evening and that we ought to fly at once. I tell you that, if he does not hear me sing tomorrow, it will cause him infinite pain." "It is difficult not to cause him pain and yet to escape from him for good." "You are right in that, Raoul, for certainly he will die of my flight." And she added in a dull voice, "But then it counts both ways, for we risk his killing us." "Does he love you so much?" "He would commit murder for me." "But one can find out where he lives, one can go in search of him. Now that we know that Erik is not a ghost, one can speak to him and force him to answer." Christine shook her head. "No, no, there is nothing to be done with Erik except to run away." "Then why, when you are able to run away, did you go back to him?" "Because I had to, and you will understand that when I tell you how I left him." "Oh, I hate him!" cried Raoul. "And you, Christine, tell me, do you hate him too?" "No," said Christine simply. "No, of course not. Why, you love him. Your fear, your terror, all of that is just love, and love of the most exquisite kind, the kind which people do not admit, even to themselves," said Raoul bitterly. "The kind that gives you a thrill when you think of it. Picture it, a man who lives in a palace underground." And he gave a leer. "Then you want me to go back there?" said the young girl cruelly. "Take care, Raoul, I have told you I should never return." There was an appalling silence between the three of them. The two who spoke and the shadow that listened behind them. "Before answering that," said Raoul at last, speaking very slowly, "I should like to know with what feeling he inspires you, since you do not hate him." "With horror," she said. "That is the terrible thing about it. He fills me with horror, and I do not hate him. How can I hate him, Raoul? Think of Erik at my feet, in the house, on the lake, underground. He accuses himself, he curses himself, he implores my forgiveness. He confesses his cheat. He loves me. He lays at my feet an immense and tragic love. He has carried me off for love. He has imprisoned me with him, underground, for love. But he respects me. He crawls, he moans, he weeps. And when I stood up, Raoul, and told him that I could only despise him if he did not, then and there, give me my liberty, he offered it. He offered to show me the mysterious road. Only he rose too, and I was made to remember that, though he was not an angel, nor a ghost, nor a genius, he remained the voice. For he sang. And I listened, and stayed. That night we did not exchange another word. He sang me to sleep. When I woke up, I was alone, lying on a sofa in a simply furnished little bedroom, with an ordinary mahogany bedstead, lit by a lamp standing on the marble top of an old Louis Philippe chest of drawers. I soon discovered that I was a prisoner, and that the only outlet from my room was led to a very comfortable bathroom. On returning to the bedroom, I saw on the chest of drawers a note, in red ink, which said, "My dear Christine, you need have no concern as to your fate. You have no better nor more respectful friend in the world than myself. You are alone, at present, in this home which is yours. I am going out shopping to fetch you all the things that you can need." I felt sure that I had fallen into the hands of a madman. I ran round my little apartment, looking for a way of escape which I could not find. I upbraided myself for my absurd superstition, which had caused me to fall into the trap. I felt inclined to laugh and to cry at the same time. This was the state of mind in which Erik found me. After giving 3 taps on the wall, he walked in quietly through a door which I had not noticed and which he left open. He had his arms full of boxes and parcels, and arranged them on the bed in a leisurely fashion, while I overwhelmed him with abuse and called upon him to take off his mask, if it covered the face of an honest man. He replied serenely, "You shall never see Eric's face." And he reproached me with not having finished dressing at that time of day. He was good enough to tell me that it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon. He said he would give me half an hour, and while he spoke, wound up my watch and set it for me, after which he asked me to come to the dining room, where a nice lunch was waiting for us. I was very angry, slammed the door in his face, and went to the bathroom. When I came out again, feeling greatly refreshed, Eric said that he loved me, but that he would never tell me so except when I allowed him, and that the rest of the time would be devoted to music. "What do you mean by the rest of the time?" I asked. 5 days, he said, with decision. I asked him if I should then be free, and he said, "You will be free, Christine, for when those 5 days are past, you will have learned not to see me. And then, from time to time, you will come to see your poor Eric." He pointed to a chair opposite him, at a small table, and I sat down, feeling greatly perturbed. However, I ate a few prawns and the wing of a chicken, and drank half a glass of Tokay, which he had made himself, he told me, brought from the Königsberg cellars. Eric did not eat or drink. I asked him what his nationality was, and if that name of Eric did not point out his Scandinavian origin. He said that he had no name and no country, and that he had taken the name of Eric by accident. After lunch he rose and gave me the tips of his fingers, saying that he would like to show me over his flat. But I snatched away my hand and gave a cry. What I had touched was cold, and at the same time bony, and I remembered that his hands smelled of death. "Oh, forgive me," he moaned, and he opened a door before me. "This is my bedroom, if you care to see it. It is rather curious. His manners, his words, his attitude gave me confidence, and I went in without hesitation. I felt as if I were entering the room of a dead person. The walls were all hung with black, but instead of the white trimmings that usually set off that funereal upholstery, there was an enormous stave of music with the notes of the Dies Irae many times repeated. In the middle of the room was a canopy, from which hung curtains of red brocaded stuff, and under the canopy an open coffin. "That is where I sleep," said Eric. "One has to get used to everything in life, even to eternity." The sight upset me so much that I turned away my head. Then I saw the keyboard of an organ which filled one whole side of the walls. On the desk was a music book covered with red notes. I asked leave to look at it and read Don Juan Triumphant. "Yes," he said, "I compose sometimes. I began that work 20 years ago. When I have finished, I shall take it away with me in that coffin and never wake up again." "You must work at it as seldom as you can," I said. He replied, "I sometimes work at it for 14 days and nights together, during which I live on music only. And then I rest for years at a time." "Will you play me something out of your Don Juan Triumphant?" I asked, thinking to please him. "You must never ask me that," he said in a gloomy voice. "I will play you Mozart if you like, which will only make you weep, but my Don Juan, Christine, burns, and yet he is not struck by fire from heaven." Thereupon we returned to the drawing-room. I noticed that there was no mirror in the whole apartment. I was going to remark upon this, but Eric had already sat down to the piano. He said, "You see, Christine, there is some music that is so terrible that it consumes all those who approach it. Fortunately, you have not come to that music yet, for you would lose all your pretty coloring and nobody would know you when you returned to Paris. Let us sing something from the opera, Christine Day." He spoke these last words as though he were flinging an insult at me. "What did you do?" I had no time to think about the meaning he put into words. We at once began the duet in Othello, and already the catastrophe was upon us. I sang Desdemona with a despair, a terror which I had never displayed before. As for him, his voice thundered forth his revengeful soul at every note. Love, jealousy, hatred burst out around us in harrowing cries. Eric's black mask made me think of the natural mask of the Moor of Venice. He was Othello himself. Suddenly, I felt a need to see beneath the mask. I wanted to know the face of the voice, and with a movement which I was utterly unable to control, swiftly my fingers tore away the mask. Oh, horror! 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 Christine stopped at the thought of the vision that had scared her, while the echoes of the night, which had repeated the name of Eric, now thrice moaned the cry. Horror! 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 Raoul and Christine, clasping each other closely, raised their eyes to the stars that shone in a clear and peaceful sky. Raoul said, "Strange, Christine, that this calm, soft night should be so full of plaintive sounds. One would think that it was sorrowing with us." "When you know the secret, Raoul, your ears, like mine, will be full of lamentations." She took Raoul's protecting hands in hers and, with a long shiver, continued, "Yes, if I lived to be 100, I should always hear the superhuman cry of grief and rage which he uttered when the terrible sight appeared before my eyes. Raoul, you have seen death's heads, when they have been dried and withered by the centuries, and perhaps, if you were not the victim of a nightmare, you saw his death's head at Paros. And then you saw Red Death stalking about at the last masked ball. But all those death's heads were motionless, and their dumb horror was not alive. But imagine, if you can, Red Death's mask suddenly coming to life in order to express, with the 4 black holes of its eyes, its nose and its mouth, the extreme anger, the mighty fury of a demon. And not a ray of light from the sockets, for as I learned later, you cannot see his blazing eyes except in the dark. I fell back against the wall and he came up to me, grinding his teeth, and as I fell upon my knees, he hissed mad incoherent words and curses at me. Leaning over me, he cried, 'Look, you want to see? See! Feast your eyes, glut your soul on my cursed ugliness. Look at Eric's face. Now you know the face of the voice. You were not content to hear me, eh? You wanted to know what I looked like. Oh, you women are so inquisitive. Well, are you satisfied? I'm a very good-looking fellow, eh? When a woman has seen me, as you have, she belongs to me. She loves me forever. I'm a kind of Don Juan, you know.' And, drawing himself up to his full height, with his hand on his hip, wagging the hideous thing that was his head on his shoulders, he roared, 'Look at me! I am Don Juan triumphant!' And when I turned away my head and begged for mercy, he drew it to him, brutally, twisting his dead fingers into my hair. 'Enough, enough!' cried Raoul. 'I will kill him. In heaven's name, Christine, tell me where the dining room on the lake is. I must kill him.' 'Oh, be quiet, Raoul, if you want to know.' 'Yes, and I want to know how and why you went back. I must know. But in any case, I will kill him.' 'Oh, Raoul, listen, listen! He dragged me by my hair, and then... Oh, it is too horrible!' 'Well, what? Out with it!' exclaimed Raoul fiercely. 'Out with it, quick!' 'Then he hissed at me. Ah, I frighten you, do I? I dare say! Perhaps you think that I have another mask, eh? And that this head is a mask. Well,' he roared, 'tear it off as you did the other. Come along, I insist. Your hands, give me your hands.' And he seized my hands and dug them into his awful face. He tore his flesh with my nails, tore his terrible dead flesh with my nails. 'Know,' he shouted, while his throat throbbed and panted like a furnace, 'know that I am built up of death from head to foot, and that it is a corpse that loves you and adores you and will never, never leave you. Look, I am not laughing now, I am crying for you, Christine, who have torn off my mask and who therefore can never leave me again. As long as you thought me handsome, you could have come back. I know you would have come back, but now that you know my hideousness, you would run away for good. So I shall keep you here. Why did you want to see me? Oh, mad Christine, who wanted to see me, when my own father never saw me, and when my own mother, so as not to see me, made me a present of my first mask?' He had let go of me at last, and was dragging himself about on the floor, uttering terrible sobs. And then he crawled away like a snake, went into his room, closed the door, and left me alone to my reflections. Presently I heard the sound of the organ, and then I began to understand Eric's contemptuous phrase when he spoke about opera music. What I now heard was utterly different from what I had heard up to then. his Don Juan triumphant, for I had not a doubt but that he had rushed to his masterpiece to forget the horror of the moment, seemed to me at first one long, awful, magnificent sob. But little by little it expressed every emotion, every suffering of which mankind is capable. It intoxicated me, and I opened the door that separated us. Erik rose as I entered, but dared not turn in my direction. "Erik," I cried, "show me your face without fear. I swear that you are the most unhappy and sublime of men, and if ever again I shiver when I look at you, it will be because I am thinking of the splendor of your genius." Then Erik turned round, for he believed me, and I also had faith in myself. He fell at my feet with words of love in his dead mouth, and the music had ceased. He kissed the hem of my dress and did not see that I closed my eyes. What more can I tell you, dear? You know the tragedy. It went on for a fortnight during which I lied to him. My lies were as hideous as the monster who inspired them, but they were the price of my liberty. I burned his mask, and I managed so well that even when he was not singing he tried to catch my eye, like a dog sitting by its master. He was my faithful slave and paid me endless little attentions. Gradually I gave him such confidence that he ventured to take me walking on the banks of the lake and to row me in the boat on its leaden waters. Toward the end of my captivity he let me out through the gates that closed the underground passages in the Rue Scribe. Here a carriage awaited us and took us to the Bois. The night when we met you was nearly fatal to me, for he is terribly jealous of you, and I had to tell them that you were soon going away. Then, at last, after a fortnight of that horrible captivity, during which I was filled with pity, enthusiasm, despair, and horror by turns, he believed me when I said, "I will come back." "And you went back, Christine," groaned Raoul. "Yes, dear, and I must tell you that it was not his frightful threats when setting me free that helped me to keep my word, but the harrowing sob which he gave on the threshold of the tomb. That sob attached me to the unfortunate man more than I myself suspected when saying good-bye to him. Poor Erik! Poor Erik!" "Christine," said Raoul, rising, "you tell me that you love me, but you had recovered your liberty hardly a few hours before you returned to Erik. Remember the masked ball?" "Yes, and do you remember those hours which I passed with you, Raoul, to the great danger of both of us?" "I doubted your love for me during those hours." "Do you doubt it still, Raoul? Then know that each of my visits to Erik increased my horror of him. For each of those visits, instead of calming him, as I hoped, made him mad with love. I am so frightened, so frightened." "You are frightened, but do you love me? If Erik were good-looking, would you love me, Christine?" She rose in her turn, putting her two trembling arms around the young man's neck, and said, "Oh, my betrothed of a day, if I did not love you, I would not give you my lips. Take them for the first time and the last." He kissed her lips, but the night that surrounded them was rent asunder. They fled as at the approach of a storm, and their eyes, filled with dread for Erik, showed them, before they disappeared, high up above them, an immense night bird that stared at them with its blazing eyes and seemed to cling to the string of Apollo's lyre. End of Chapter 12 of The Phantom of the Opera. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Kristin Luoma, greenkri.com. Phantom of the Opera, Chapter 13. A Master Stroke of the Trapdoor Lover. Raoul and Christine ran, eager to escape from the roof and the blazing eyes that showed only in the dark. And they did not stop before they came to the 8th floor on the way down. There was no performance at the opera that night, and the passages were empty. Suddenly, a queer-looking form stood before them and blocked the road. "No, not this way!" And the form pointed to another passage by which they were to reach the wings. Raoul wanted to stop and ask for an explanation, but the form, which wore a sort of long frock coat and a pointed cap, said, "Quick! Go away quickly!" Christine was already dragging Raoul, compelling him to start running again. "But who is he? Who is that man?" he asked. Christine replied, "It's the Persian." "What's he doing here?" "Nobody knows. He is always in the opera." "You are making me run away for the first time in my life. If we really saw Erik, what I ought to have done was to nail him to Apollo's lyre, just as we nail the owls to the walls of our Breton farms, and there would have been no more question of him." "My dear Raoul, you would first have had to climb up to Apollo's lyre. That is no easy matter." "The blazing eyes were there." "Oh, you are getting like me now, seeing him everywhere. What I took for blazing eyes was probably a couple of stars shining through the strings of the lyre." And Christine went down another floor, with Raoul following her. "As you have quite made up your mind to go, Christine, I assure you it would be better to go at once. Why wait for tomorrow? He may have heard us tonight." "No, no, he is working, I tell you, at his Don Juan triumphant and not thinking of us." "You are so sure of that you keep on looking behind you. Come to my dressing room." "Hadn't we better meet outside the opera?" "Never till we go away for good. It would bring us bad luck if I did not keep my word. I promised him to see you only here." "It's a good thing for me that he allowed you even that. Do you know," said Raoul bitterly, "that it was very plucky of you to let us play at being engaged?" "Why, my dear, he knows all about it. He said, 'I trust you, Christine. Monsieur de Chagny is in love with you and is going abroad. Before he goes, I want him to be as happy as I am.' Are people so unhappy when they love?" "Yes, Christine, when they love and are not sure of being loved." They came to Christine's dressing room. "Why do you think that you are safer in this room than on the stage?" asked Raoul. "You heard him through the walls here, therefore he can certainly hear us." "No, he gave me his word not to be behind the walls of my dressing room again, and I believe Erik's word. This room and my bedroom on the lake are for me, exclusively, and not to be approached by him. How can you have gone from this room into that dark passage, Christine? Suppose we try to repeat your movements, shall we?" "It is dangerous, dear, for the glass might carry me off again, and instead of running away I should be obliged to go to the end of the secret passage, to the lake, and there call Erik. Would he hear you?" "Erik will hear me wherever I call him. He told me so. He is a very curious genius. You must not think, Raoul, that he is simply a man who amuses himself by living underground. He does things that no other man could do. He knows things which nobody in the world knows." "Take care, Christine, you are making a ghost of him again." "No, he is not a ghost. He is a man of heaven and earth, that is all." "A man of heaven and earth, that is all? A nice way to speak of him! And are you still resolved to run away from him?" "Yes, tomorrow." "Tomorrow? You will have no resolve left." "Then, Raoul, you must run away with me in spite of myself. Is that understood?" "I shall be here at 12 tomorrow night. I shall keep my promise, whatever happens. You say that after listening to the performance, he is to wait for you in the dining room on the lake?" "Yes." "And how are you to reach him if you don't know how to go out by the glass?" "Why, by going straight to the edge of the lake." Christine opened a box, took out an enormous key and showed it to Raoul. "What's that?" he asked. "The key of the gate to the underground passage in the Rue Scribe." "I understand, Christine. It leads straight to the lake. Give it to me, Christine, will you?" "Never!" she said. "That would be treacherous." Suddenly Christine changed color. A mortal pallor overspread her features. "Oh, heavens!" she cried. "Erik! Erik! Have pity on me!" "Hold your tongue," said Raoul. "You told me he could not hear you." But the singer's attitude became more and more inexplicable. She wrung her fingers, repeating with a distraught air, "Oh, heaven! Oh, heaven!" "What is it? What is it?" Raoul implored. "The ring! The gold ring he gave me." "Oh, so Erik gave you that ring?" "You know he did, Raoul. But what you don't know is that, when he gave it to me, he said, 'I give you back your liberty, Christine, on condition that this ring is always on your finger. As long as you keep it, you will be protected against all danger, and Erik will remain your friend. But woe to you if you ever part with it, for Erik will have his revenge. My dear, the ring is gone! Woe to us both!" They both looked for the ring, but could not find it. Christine refused to be pacified. "It was while I gave you that kiss up above, under Apollo's lyre," she said. "The ring must have slipped from my finger and dropped into the street. We can never find it. And what misfortunes are in store for us now! Oh, to run away!" "Let us run away at once," Raoul insisted once more. She hesitated. He thought that she was going to say yes. Then her bright pupils became dimmed and she said, "No, tomorrow." And she left him hurriedly, still wringing and rubbing her fingers as though she hoped to bring the ring back like that. Raoul went home, greatly perturbed at all that he had heard. "If I don't save her from the hands of that humbug," he said aloud as he went to bed, "she is lost. But I shall save her." He put out his lamp and felt a need to insult Erik in the dark. Thrice over he shouted, "Humbug! Humbug! Humbug!" But suddenly he raised himself on his elbow. A cold sweat poured from his temples. Two eyes, like blazing coals, had appeared at the foot of his bed. They stared at him fixedly, terribly, in the darkness of the night. Raoul was no coward, and yet he trembled. He put out a groping, hesitating hand toward the table by his bedside. He found the matches and lit his candle. The eyes disappeared. Still uneasy in his mind, he thought to himself, "She told me that his eyes only showed in the dark. His eyes have disappeared in the light, but he may be there still." And he rose, hunted about, went around the room. He looked under his bed like a child. Then he thought himself absurd, got into bed again and blew out the candle. The eyes reappeared. He sat up and stared back at them with all the courage he possessed. Then he cried, "Is that you, Erik? Man, genius, or ghost? Is it you?" He reflected. If it's he's on the balcony. Then he ran to the chest of drawers and groped for his revolver. He opened the balcony window, looked out, saw nothing and closed the window again. He went back to bed, shivering, for the night was cold, and put the revolver on the table within his reach. The eyes were still there at the foot of the bed. Were they between the bed and the window pane, or behind the pane, that is to say, on the balcony? That was what Raoul wanted to know. He also wanted to know if those eyes belonged to a human being. He wanted to know everything. Then, patiently, calmly, he seized his revolver and took aim. He aimed a little above the two eyes. Surely, if they were eyes, and if above those two eyes there was a forehead, and if Raoul was not too clumsy... The shot made a terrible din amid the silence of the slumbering house, and while footsteps came hurrying along the passages, Raoul sat up with outstretched arm, ready to fire again if need be. This time the two eyes had disappeared. Servants appeared, carrying lights. Count Philippe, terribly anxious. "What is it?" "I think I have been dreaming," replied the young man. "I fired at 2 stars that kept me from sleeping." "You are raving! Are you ill? For God's sake, tell me, Raoul, what happened?" And the count seized hold of the revolver. "No, I'm not raving. Besides, we shall soon see." He got out of the bed, put on a dressing gown and slippers, took a light from the hands of a servant, and, opening the window, stepped out on the balcony. The count saw that the window had been pierced by a bullet at a man's height. Raoul was leaning over the balcony with his candle. "Aha!" he said. "Blood! Blood! Here, there, more blood! That's a good thing. A ghost who bleeds is less dangerous." He grinned. "Raoul! Raoul! Raoul!" The count was shaking him as though he were trying to waken a sleepwalker. "But, my dear brother, I am not asleep," Raoul protested impatiently. "You can see the blood for yourself. I thought I had been dreaming and firing at 2 stars. It was Erik's eyes, and here is his blood. After all, perhaps I was wrong to shoot, and Christine is quite capable of never forgiving me. All this would not have happened if I had drawn the curtains before going to bed." Raoul, have you suddenly got mad? Wake up! What, still? You would do better to help me find Erik, for after all, a ghost who bleeds can always be found. The Count's valet said, "That is so, sir, there is blood on the balcony." The other manservant brought a lamp, by the light of which they examined the balcony carefully. The marks of blood followed the rail till they reached a gutter spout. Then they went up the gutter spout. "My dear fellow," said the Count Philippe, "you have fired at a cat." "The misfortune is," said Raoul with a grin, "that it's quite possible. With Erik you never know. Is it Erik? Is it the cat? Is it the ghost? No, with Erik you can't tell." Raoul went on making the strange sort of remarks which corresponded so intimately and logically with the preoccupation of his brain, and which at the same time tended to persuade many people that his mind was unhinged. The Count himself was seized with this idea, and later the examining magistrate, on receiving the report of the commissary of police, came to the same conclusion. "Who is Erik?" asked the Count, pressing his brother's hand. "He is my rival, and if he's not dead, it's a pity." He dismissed the servants with a wave of the hand, and the two Chagnys were left alone. But the men were not out of earshot before the Count's valet heard Raoul say, distinctly and emphatically, "I shall carry off Christine Daae tonight." This phrase was afterward repeated to Mr. Farr, the examining magistrate. But no one ever knew exactly what passed between the two brothers at this interview. The servants declared that this was not their first quarrel. Their voices penetrated the wall, and it was always an actress called Christine Daae that was in question. At breakfast, the early morning breakfast which the Count took in his study, Philippe sent for his brother. Raoul arrived silent and gloomy. The scene was a very short one. Philippe handed his brother a copy of the Epoque and said, "Read that." The Viscount read, "The latest news in the Faubourg is that there is a promise of marriage between Mademoiselle Christine Daae, the opera singer, and Mr. le Vicomte Raoul de Chagny. If the gossips are to be credited, Count Philippe has sworn that, for the first time on record, the Chagnys shall not keep their promise. But as love is all-powerful, at the opera, and even more than elsewhere, we wonder how Count Philippe intends to prevent the Viscount, his brother, from leading the new Margarita to the altar. The two brothers are said to adore each other, but the Count is curiously mistaken if he imagines that brotherly love will triumph over love pure and simple." "You see, Raoul," said the Count, "you are making us ridiculous. That little girl has turned your head with her ghost stories." The Viscount had evidently repeated Christine's narrative to his brother during the night. All that he now said was, "Good-bye, Philippe." "Have you quite made up your mind? You are going tonight with her?" No reply. "Surely you will not do anything so foolish. I shall know how to prevent you." "Good-bye, Philippe," said the Viscount again, and left the room. This scene was described to the examining magistrate by the Count himself, who did not see Raoul again until that evening, at the opera a few minutes before Christine's disappearance. Raoul, in fact, devoted the whole day to his preparations for the flight. The horses, the carriage, the coachman, the provisions, the luggage, the money required for the journey, the road to be taken, he had resolved not to go by train, so as to throw the ghost off the scent. All this had to be settled and provided for, and it occupied him until 9 o'clock at night. At 9 o'clock, a sort of traveling barouche, with the curtains of its windows closed down, took its place in the rank of the rotunda side. It was drawn by two powerful horses driven by a coachman whose face was almost concealed in the long folds of a muffler. In front of this traveling carriage were three broughams, belonging respectively to Carlotta, who had suddenly returned to Paris, to Sorelli, and, at the head of the rank, to Comte Philippe de Chagny. No one left the barouche. The coachman remained on his box, and the three other coachmen remained on theirs. A shadow in a long black cloak and a soft black felt hat passed along the pavement between the rotunda and the carriages, examined the barouche carefully, went up to the horses and the coachman, and then moved away without saying a word. The magistrate afterwards believed that this shadow was that of the Vicomte Raoul de Chagny. But I do not agree, seeing that that evening, as every evening, the Vicomte de Chagny was wearing a tall hat, which hat, besides, was subsequently found. I am more inclined to think that the shadow was that of the ghost, who knew all about the whole affair, as the reader will soon perceive. They were giving Faust, as it happened, before a splendid house. The Faubourg was magnificently represented, and the paragraph in that morning's Epoque had already produced its effect, for all eyes were turned to the box in which Count Philippe sat alone, apparently in a very indifferent and careless frame of mind. The feminine element in the brilliant audience seemed curiously puzzled, and the Viscount's absence gave rise to any amount of whispering behind the fans. Christine Daae met with a rather cold reception. That special audience could not forgive her for aiming so high. The singer noticed this unfavorable attitude of a portion of the house and was confused by it. The regular frequenters of the opera, who pretended to know the truth about the Viscount's love story, exchanged significant smiles at certain passages in Margarita's part, and they made a show of turning and looking at Philippe de Chagny's box when Christine sang. I wish I could but know who was he that addressed me, if he was noble, or at least what his name is. The count sat with his chin on his hand, and seemed to pay no attention to these manifestations. He kept his eyes fixed on the stage, but his thoughts appeared to be far away. Christine lost her self-assurance more and more. She trembled. She felt on the verge of a breakdown. Carolus Fonta wondered if she was ill, if she could keep the stage until the end of the garden act. In the front of the house, people remembered the catastrophe that had befallen Carlotta at the end of that act and the historic co-act which had momentarily interrupted her career in Paris. Just then, Carlotta made her entrance in a box facing the stage. A sensational entrance. Poor Christine raised her eyes upon this fresh subject of excitement. She recognized her rival. She thought she saw a sneer on her lips. That saved her. She forgot everything in order to triumph once more. From that moment the prima donna sang with all her heart and soul. She tried to surpass all that she had done till then, and she succeeded. In the last act, when she began the invocation to the angels, she made all the members of the audience feel as though they, too, had wings. In the center of the amphitheater, a man stood up and remained standing, facing the singer. It was Raoul. Holy angel in heaven blessed, and Christine, her arms outstretched, her throat filled with music, the glory of her hair falling over her bare shoulders, uttered the divine cry, "My spirit longs with thee to rest." It was at that moment that the stage was suddenly plunged in darkness. It happened so quickly that the spectators hardly had time to utter a sound of stupefaction, for the gas at once lit up the stage again, but Christine Daae was no longer there. What had become of her? What was that miracle? All exchanged glances without understanding, and the excitement at once reached its height. Nor was the tension any less great on the stage itself. Men rushed from the wings to the spot where Christine had been singing that very instant. The performance was interrupted amid the greatest disorder. Where had Christine gone? What witchcraft had snatched her away before the eyes of thousands of enthusiastic onlookers and from the arms of Carolus Fonta himself? It was as though the angels had really carried her up to rest. Raoul, still standing up in the amphitheater, had uttered a cry. Count Philippe had sprung to his feet in his box. People looked at the stage, at the count, at Raoul, and wondered if this curious event was connected in any way with the paragraph in that morning's paper. But Raoul hurriedly left his seat, the count disappeared from his box, and while the curtain was lowered, the subscribers rushed to the door that led behind the scenes. The rest of the audience waited amid an indescribable hubbub. Everyone spoke at once. Everyone tried to suggest an explanation of the extraordinary incident. At last, the curtain rose slowly, and Carolus Fonta stepped to the conductor's desk, and in a sad and serious voice said: "Ladies and gentlemen, an unprecedented event has taken place and thrown us into a state of the greatest alarm. Our sister artist, Christine Daae, has disappeared before our eyes, and nobody can tell us how." End of chapter 13 of The Phantom of the Opera.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. Chapter 14. The Singular Attitude of a Safety Pin. Behind the curtain there was an indescribable crowd. Artists, scene-shifters, dancers, supers, choristers, subscribers were all asking questions, shouting and hustling one another. What became of her? She's run away. With the Vicomte de Chagny, of course. No, with the Count. Ah, here's Carlotta. Carlotta did the trick. No, it was the ghost. And a few laughed, especially as a careful examination of the trapdoors and boards had put the idea of an accident out of the question. Amid this noisy throng, 3 men stood talking in a low voice and with despairing gestures. They were Gabriel, the chorus-master, Mercier, the acting manager, and Remy, the secretary. They retired to a corner of the lobby by which the stage communicates with the wide passage leading to the foyer of the ballet. Here they stood and argued behind some enormous properties. "I knocked at the door," said Remy. "They did not answer. Perhaps they are not in their offices. In any case it's impossible to find out, for they took the keys with them." They were obviously the managers, who had given orders during the last entr'acte that they were not to be disturbed on any pretext whatever. They were not in to anybody. "All the same," exclaimed Gabriel, "a singer isn't run away with from the middle of the stage every day." "Did you shout that to them?" asked Mercier. "I'll go back again," said Remy, and disappeared at a run. Thereupon the stage manager arrived. "Well, Monsieur Mercier, are you coming? What are you 2 doing here? You're wanted, Monsieur Acting Manager." "I refuse to do anything or to know anything before the commissary arrives," declared Mercier. "I have sent Mifroid. We shall see when he comes. And I tell you that you ought to go down to the organ at once. Not before the commissary comes. I've been down to the organ myself already." "Ah! And what did you see?" "Well, I saw nobody, do you hear? Nobody." "What do you want me to do down there?" "You're right," said the stage manager, frantically pushing his hands through his rebellious hair. "You're right, but there might be someone at the organ who could tell us how the stage came to suddenly be darkened. Now Mauclair is not to be found. Do you understand that?" Mauclair was the gasman who dispensed day and night at will on the stage of the opera. "Mauclair is not to be found," repeated Mercier, taken aback. "Well, what about his assistants?" "There's no Mauclair and no assistants. No one at the lights, I tell you. You can imagine," roared the stage manager, "that the little woman must have been carried off by somebody. She didn't run away by herself. It was a calculated stroke, and we have to find out about it. And what are the managers doing all this time? I say, I gave orders that no one was to go down to the lights, and I posted a fireman in front of the gasman's box beside the organ. Wasn't that right?" Yes, quite right, quite right. And now let's wait for the commissary." The stage manager walked away, shrugging his shoulders, fuming, muttering insults at those milksops, who remained quietly squatting in a corner while the whole theatre was topsy-turvy. Gabriel and Mercier were not so quiet as all that. Only they had received an order that paralyzed them. The managers were not to be disturbed on any account. Remy had violated that order and met with no success. At that moment he returned from his new expedition, wearing a curiously startled air. "Well, have you seen them?" asked Mercier. Moncharmin opened the door at last. His eyes were starting out of his head. I thought he meant to strike me. I could not get a word in, and what do you think he shouted to me? "Have you a safety pin?" "No." "Well, then clear out." I tried to tell him that an extraordinary thing had happened on the stage, but he roared, "A safety pin! Give me a safety pin at once!" A boy heard him. He was bellowing like a bull, ran up with a safety pin and gave it to him, whereupon Moncharmin slammed the door in my face, and there you are." "And you couldn't have said Christine Daae?" "I should like to have seen you in my place. He was foaming at the mouth. He thought of nothing but a safety pin. I believe if they hadn't brought him one he would have fallen down in a fit. Oh, all that isn't normal, and our managers are going mad. Besides, I can't go on like this. I'm not used to being treated in that fashion." Suddenly Gabriel whispered, "It's another trick of O.G.'s." Remy gave a grin, Mercier a sigh, and seemed about to speak, but meeting Gabriel's eyes said nothing. However, Mercier felt his responsibility increase as the minutes passed without the managers appearing, and at last he could stand it no longer. "Look here, I'll go and hunt them out myself." Gabriel, turning very gloomy and serious, stopped him. "Be careful what you're doing, Mercier. If they're staying in their office, it's probably because they've got to. O.G. has more than one trick in his bag." But Mercier shook his head. "That's their lookout. I'm going. If people had listened to me, the police would have known everything long ago." And he went. "What's everything?" asked Remy. "What was there to tell the police? Why don't you answer, Gabriel?"
"Ah, so you know something."
"Well, you'd do better to tell me, too, if you don't want me to shout out that you are all going mad. Yes, that's what you are, mad." Gabriel put on a stupid look, and pretended not to understand the private secretary's unseemly outburst. "What something am I supposed to know?" he said. "I don't know what you mean." Remy began to lose his temper. "This evening Richard and Moncharmin were behaving like lunatics, here between the acts." "I never noticed it," growled Gabriel, very much annoyed. "Then you're the only one. Do you think that I didn't see them, and that Monsieur Parabrise, the manager of the Crédit Central, noticed nothing, and that Monsieur de la Borderie, the ambassador, has no eyes to see with? Why, all the subscribers were pointing at our managers." "But what were our managers doing?" asked Gabriel, putting on his most innocent air. "What were they doing? You know better than anyone else what they were doing. You were there, and you were watching them, you and Mercier, and you were the only two who didn't laugh." "I don't understand." Gabriel raised his arms and dropped them to his side again, which gesture was meant to convey that the question did not interest him in the least. Remy continued, "What is the sense of this new mania of theirs? Why won't they have any one come near them now?" "What? Won't they have any one come near them?" "And they won't let any one touch them." "Really? Have you noticed that they won't let any one touch them? That is certainly odd." "Oh, so you admit it! And high time, too! And then they walk backwards." "Backwards? You have seen our managers walk backwards? Why, I thought that only crabs walked backwards." "Don't laugh, Gabriel, don't laugh." "I'm not laughing," protested Gabriel, looking as solemn as a judge. "Perhaps you can tell me this, Gabriel, as you're an intimate friend of the management. When I went up to Monsieur Richard outside the foyer during the garden interval, with my hand out before me, why did Monsieur Moncharmin whisper to me, 'Go away, whatever you do, don't touch Monsieur le Directeur'? Am I supposed to have an infectious disease? It's incredible. And a little later, when Monsieur de la Borderie went up to Monsieur Richard, didn't you see Monsieur Moncharmin fling himself between them and hear him exclaim, 'Monsieur l'Ambassadeur, I entreat you not to touch Monsieur le Directeur'? It's terrible. And what was Richard doing meanwhile?" "What was he doing? Why, you saw him. He turned about, bowed in front of him, though there was nobody in front of him, and withdrew backwards." "Backwards?" "And Moncharmin, behind Richard, also turned about, that is, he described a semicircle behind Richard, and also walked backwards. And they went like that to the staircase leading to the manager's office. Backwards, backwards, backwards. Well, if they are not mad, will you explain what it means?" "Perhaps they were practicing a figure in the ballet," suggested Gabriel, without much conviction in his voice. The secretary was furious at this wretched joke, made at so dramatic a moment. He knit his brows and compressed his lips. Then he put his mouth to Gabriel's ear. "Don't be so sly, Gabriel. There are things going on for which you and Mercier are partially responsible." "What do you mean?" asked Gabriel. "Christine Daae is not the only one who suddenly disappeared tonight." "Oh, nonsense." "There's no nonsense about it. Perhaps you can tell me why, when Mother Giry came down to the foyer just now, Mercier took her by the hand and hurried her away with him." "Really?" said Gabriel. "I never saw it." "You did see it, Gabriel, for you went with Mercier and Mother Giry to Mercier's office. Since then, you and Mercier have been seen, but no one has seen Mother Giry." "Do you think we've eaten her?" "No, but you've locked her up in the office, and anyone passing the office can hear her yelling, 'Oh, the scoundrels! Oh, the scoundrels!'" At this point of that singular conversation, Mercier arrived, all out of breath. "There!" he said in a gloomy voice. "It's worse than ever." I shouted, "It's a serious matter! Open the door! It's I, Mercier!" I heard footsteps, the door opened, and Moncharmin appeared. He was very pale. He said, "What do you want?" I answered, "Someone has run off with Christine Daae." What do you think he said? "And a good job, too!" And he shut the door after putting this in my hand. Mercier opened his hand. Remy and Gabriel looked. "The safety pin!" cried Remy. "Strange, strange!" muttered Gabriel, who could not help shivering. Suddenly a voice made them all three turn round. "I beg your pardon, gentlemen, but could you tell me where Christine Daae is?" In spite of the serious circumstances, the absurdity of the question would have made them roar with laughter, if they had not caught sight of a face so sorrow-stricken that they were at once seized with pity. It was the Vicomte Raoul de Chagny. End of chapter 14.